This is CityCast Twin Cities. I'm Sean McPherson, and here's what the cities are talking about. John, do you like Krispy Kreme? Denzel, I just hope you have a more enthusiastic answer than that. Denzel, do you like Krispy Kreme?
I have the complete inverse answer. I absolutely love a Krispy Kreme.
All right, we'll have John on this episode, but going forward, I only want Krispy Kreme aficionados. It is a spectacular donut, John, and you are missing out.
Look, man, I appreciate a fine baked good. And if you guys want to just like that sweet frosting that tastes like sugar, that's fine.
Yeah, me and Denzel are of the people, and that's cool. That's fine with me. Krispy Kreme hasn't been around Minnesota for 17 years. Honestly, it feels like yesterday. I remember going to the Woodbury Krispy Kreme. I feel like they closed a year ago, but there is a location in Fridley, and the crowds are going to be wild because the people are with me and Denzel. Folks love Krispy Kreme. Today, though, we're talking about how Minnesota is responding to the possible end of the longest federal shutdown in U.S. history. We'll also find out about the beef with Midwest meat packagers, and we'll be talking about a celebrated play that's finishing its run this week at the Guthrie. I'm joined by John O'Sullivan with 1 Minute Tours. Welcome back, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
I'm also joined by Denzel Belin, CityCast contributor, NPR News coordinator, and Mr. TC Leather 2026. Welcome to the show, Mr. Leather 2026.
Thank you so much. I just got sashed on Saturday, so it's been a short amount of time, but an eventful amount of time since.
I've always been trained to ask this question when something good happens in someone's life. Denzel, have you decided what you will do to celebrate this win?
Yes. First of all, I'm going to put on my sash which is made out of leather, in case you were wondering, by the wonderful people at Twin Cities Leather, who also produced the contest. I really want to work locally and partner with a lot of different orgs and do a handful of fundraising events. And I also want to take some of that time and travel outside of the Twin Cities just to spread the good word about our Twin Cities Leather community as well.
Congratulations. Let's talk about the government shutdown. I was hanging out with somebody who is a clerk to a federal judge, and we're just hanging out, and I figure we're going to have a normal conversation. I go, how are you doing? He goes, well, a little light in the wallet, have not gotten paid for a number of weeks, and that's a big struggle. The shutdown hasn't impacted me in a very tangible way, but I want to ask both of you, John, how has this government shutdown most tangibly impacted your life?
Well, I'm speaking to you from Charleston right now, where I'm at a conference. And so I had to fly out here yesterday under the stress of, was my flight going to be canceled or not? So the short answer is it hasn't really impacted me that much. That's a small inconvenience. I just can't stop thinking about these air traffic controllers, though, who it is madness to me that we just don't pay these people. And then we say, oh, but you still have to go to work. What is this dystopia?
I wouldn't be here if I wasn't being paid. And I'm not saying that because this is unpleasant. I'm just saying that's how America works. And there are people who are doing the opposite to keep our airways somewhat safe, and we should tip our hat to them. Denzel, how has this government shutdown most tangibly affected your life?
Actually, it harkened back to the contest that I had just won. One of our judges wasn't able to make it because they were flying in from a different state and their flight ended up getting canceled and they were unable to reschedule within due time. So we were down a judge and an influential figure in our leather community because of the shutdown.
Now, today is day 43 of this government shutdown, but the shutdown itself could be shutting down. The Senate passed legislation on Monday to end it, and now it's up to the House, which could vote on it today. But there's a lot of questions about it, and not everyone is remotely happy with the shutdown ending in this particular way. And I want to tip our hat to our colleagues from the Star Tribune, who had a great summary of what could come back and what's still going to be a problem. So if it's passed and the government reopens, the SNAP debacle is going to stop. It has been exactly a debacle because Minnesota distributed SNAP benefits in full for November, and then the USDA said, you can't do that. And Minnesota's kind of like, we just did. We just effing did. So figure out what you're going to do. And if this gets passed, then the bill would fund SNAP benefits through the next year. And Minnesota is strongly encouraging people to apply if they need it. As John mentioned, flights have certainly been impacted across the country, and It'll take a while for things to get back to normal. There's going to be long lines and canceled flights for a very busy travel week, that being the week of Thanksgiving. And a lot of federal workers have not been paid in over a month, so there's a lot of back pay coming their way.
So, people are getting paid. That sounds exciting to me. Like, this needs to happen. But, who exactly is unhappy about the shutdown ending, Sean?
All the Democrats on planet Earth, besides for 8 of them who went the other direction. And I'm being a little extreme about that, but especially with the Minnesota Democrats, of which there is really not a tremendous amount of cohesion as far as where they land on the political landscape. There's certainly some, but it's not like they're a monolith. So a number of Democrats are very frustrated with these 8 Senate Democrats who did step up and say we should reopen the government without getting a lot of what this shutdown was about, because this was supposed to be a battle where you go, we're not going to flip this over. We're not going to turn the government back on until we can secure these ACA tax credits. And that hasn't happened yet. The government is going to get, turned back on. It seems very likely that that's going to happen. And I'm very curious, what do you two make of this? Do you believe that the shutdown should end without establishing that these tax credits are going to exist for people in this country next year?
Well, to Denzel's point, I don't think anyone's unhappy with the government shutdown ending, because the government shutdown was affecting so many people in tremendously negative ways. But did the Democrats extract out what they needed to from it? That's kind of what the debate is around right now. And it just what's happened in the last 24 hours has required political courage from exactly nobody. The people who voted to end the shutdown are all of them either retiring or not up for re-election in 4 years. And so what's happened is there's this grandstanding going on, I think, with the Democratic Party, including here in Minnesota. We should talk about our senators here, Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith, who are up in arms saying this is terrible, we shouldn't have done this sort of thing. But you can't help but feel like it's coordinated, right? Because all the people who flipped were people who don't really have a political consequence for it. And so I think it really is time for everyone to ask of their specific senators, not to just draw the ire on people who are not going to feel any political consequence, but why are the Democrats continuing to support, a leader like Chuck Schumer in this case, and to actually require them to have a pound of flesh to pay for this? Because right now, all that's happened is that people who already are in need, already are food insecure, they just have had to go through 43 days of hell, of uncertainty, of not knowing if they're going to be able to feed their kids, and for what?
Yeah, I think, John, it's been a nasty, nasty situation. And it's that thing where a lot of these politicians aren't necessarily the ones being affected by it. And it becomes this dilemma. Of course, we want to take care of your constituents, but there's also this political agenda that, does affect in the long run. So we start seeing this tension, and I think everyone started questioning, what exactly is the best way to handle this? And I don't think there necessarily is a best way, because it was just such an awful situation to begin with. Of course, some people could be like, oh, one side should have easily changed over, but it was so clear that they were at odds. And for it to go on this long and now being our longest shutdown, I think that's going to be really indicative about how politics evolves, in the next, especially the immediate future, but over time for sure.
There is a conversation about whether Democrats should welcome in a large tent to have folks who might actually break off at times to side with Republicans on certain things, or whether that's really bad for the brand. And as far as the brand, Democrats' brand is in the toilet in so many ways right now, especially on a national level. I have a question for both of you. Do you think it's a benefit to the Democratic Party to have even 8 retirees who will fall on the sword to keep things rolling and to have a diversity of viewpoints? Or do you think that there is a time where the issues are so strong and so black and white in so many people's minds that it's time to have a lot more unity and cohesion amongst the party rather than a big tent party? And I'll first turn it to Denzel.
Yeah, I mean, it gets really tricky because sort of the more generalized a party gets, it becomes harder to tackle specific things. And I think every party has specific things that they want to do, and we start seeing which things fall to the wayside in order just to garner numbers, garner votes. So it becomes really hard, especially for someone like me who's at the intersection of Black and queerness. We often see things that fall to the wayside that critically affect minority groups in order to get the vote, so to speak. And you can even see amongst the 8 people, not only are they, they're sort of towards the end of their political career, you can sort of see a certain racial demographic and age demographic there that you have to consider when it comes to these things. So it's a really big, tricky thing because you can't overgeneralize, because then what are you standing for? It feels like I'm about to quote all of Hamilton at this point. But I think Lin-Manuel Miranda was onto something there.
Let us know what you think. Should this shutdown have continued on, or do you think that the Democrats made the right play? And I should say, the 8 Democrats made the right play. Let us know by texting or leaving us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline, 612-217-0637. And you might hear those comments in one of our mailbag segments, or we might answer one of your questions. There is more news to discuss, some of it very beefy. And before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Do you ever wonder why workforces are not as unionized as they once were? I sort of grew up in a time where people took that for granted as it's sort of like a weather pattern, like now we're less unionized. But the story of unions being created in our country involves a lot of violence, and the demise of unions in our country also involves a lot of violence. And Minnesota in the 1980s was actually part of the front line of deunionization and became part of the national conversation. And we are going to find out more about that. But leading this moment is John O'Sullivan from 1 Minute Tours. I think of you as like a dictionary definition of affable, like pleasant, enjoyable, fun. In this particular story we're going to talk about, I think of you as the affable Trojan horse. Like, hey, I'm just a Midwestern guy. I'm so friendly. Like, look at me. And, I'm coming through. I got the good vibes. And then, wow, like I'm going to hit you with some questions that the clenched butthole of the PR people in this story that we're going to talk about from Hormel and Jack Links was very intense. I think you thought I could bring cameras and mics down and be affable and ask whatever I want in Austin, Minnesota. And you learned a little something about Austin, Minnesota, and you learned that beef is big business. We're talking cease and desists, changing locks on the union office doors, etc. What did you learn, John, when you headed down to Austin to talk about beef?
Yeah, I've become this Minnesota content creator, right? And so the idea of this story for our TV show, Hidden Middle, it was that, we have a lot of Germans over here, and the Germans brought sausages with them. And so we have a lot of meat shops, especially where I grew up in southern Minnesota. And so let's just talk about that. That's interesting. That's exciting, isn't it? But then as we got into it and got to the real story, I just couldn't help but feel like I was being taken away from the parts of the story that were most interesting to me. Stories of unionization and union busting and strikes and corporate espionage. But every time I tried to bring it up, it didn't really go anywhere, at least when I talked to those meat companies.
Specifically, you talked to Hormel and Jack Links. Hormel, the home of Spam, one of the biggest meat brands in the country. And they also own Planters. They own all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
And you started sniffing around union activity in the 1980s, a loss of over $1 million in the 1920s, and also some litigation they're currently doing with Johnsonville Sausage.
Yeah.
Where was the "we're not talking about this" most palpable, and why do you think they didn't want to talk about it?
So there's actually a physical manifestation of their brand image and what they want to talk about. And it's called the Spam Museum. And so you go to the Spam Museum and it's like going to the Disney World of Spam, right? They give Spamples out, which is grilled Spam with little pretzel sticks, so you can eat the whole thing. They have a thing about Monty Python and Spamalot, which they're excited to talk about. They'll talk about Asia Pacific, which is their core market over there. And so then I asked about the 1980s, which has one of the most significant union strikes in Minnesota's history. The National Guard had to be called in because the strike went onto the interstate. It was a massive, over year-long event where Camp Solidarity was set up. People were camped out. And whether you cross the picket line or not 40 years ago, to this day determines which side of the bar you sit at the VFW. And so like it cannot be undersold how much of an impact it had on this community, but they don't want to talk about it.
You had to pivot so much when doing this. Talk more about you go in, you have your story, you think it's gonna be sort of like a wham bam, thank you.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you leave with shifting in so many ways, partially because of you, partially because of them. Is that normal? Is that hard? I don't know.
No, I mean, it's one of the really interesting things about documentary storytelling, right? Is like you have an idea of where it's going to go. In this case, this story was initially going to be about immigration, and it started out from a trip I did to Worthington, Minnesota a few years ago, which I was surprised to find out is the most diverse community in Minnesota, which I wouldn't have thought, like from a little small farming town. I grew up in Mankato, but what's happened is that with the meatpacking plants there that do incredible volume of meat packing, we have since the 1980s undervalued that profession so much that the only people we can get to go work in those conditions are immigrants. And for a long time, it was undocumented immigrants until a 2006 immigration raid from the Bush administration. And so more recently, they've turned more to documented immigrants, but they certainly can't find born and bred Americans working there in nearly as many numbers as Karen people and Sudanese people and Guatemalan people. And so that's what's represented in the community. And so that was the initial idea. I was going to tell that story. But given where we are right now with the ICE raids and where the country is with immigration, as I tried talking to people who would tell the story of immigrants in these communities, I was universally denied access for quite compassionate reasons. A lot of legal aid organizations said, look, we don't want to be anywhere near the microscope on this. And the people that you might want to talk to about this, or the lawyers who we can represent their cases, we don't want to like make that something that the federal government can see. And so we were, stuck in this position of trying to figure out how are we going to be able to tell this story? And that's where we eventually found a story was when we just went to the Spam Museum and found that we kept having questions not get answered. And so that became the new story. It's like, what questions can I ask that won't get an answer?
John, did you ever feel like, what the hell happened to my career? I was just a guy being like, hey, look at Loring Park. This is famous. And now suddenly you're like, they sent us a cease and desist letter and you're shouting to your producer, like, do you know how to blur faces? Did you ever feel so far over your skis that you thought about throwing the whole thing in the trash and going like, maybe I'm out of my depths here. Maybe I can't handle this.
I may be out of my depths here. I agree with that part of it, but I find it so interesting and such a different way of storytelling. We recorded a few episodes of my podcast that haven't come out yet. I've got a podcast called 1 Hour Detours, and I had Kathleen Hennessy, who's the managing editor of the Star Tribune, on it, in which she argued that like what I was doing was not journalism. She goes, we have journalists, and then you're doing what you're doing. I think that was what she said. And I find it really invigorating to challenge that notion, right? There's a little bit of, I get to wear different masks based on who I'm talking to, because when I went to Jack Link's, they thought that I was a fun influencer guy coming in to do a TikTok dance and to talk about Loring Park or whatever thing. And, I asked about the unprecedented amount of money that the Link's family has donated to the Trump administration. And it was like the surprise Pikachu face that I got from the head of marketing over there, because they were just like not, it wasn't even in their radar screen or even in their telescope that I was going to be anywhere near these kind of hard questions, because I think that people think of content creators as being vapid, as being people who will just take money for anything and give a good restaurant review because they got a free meal out of it. And so like, if that's what people think, great, keep thinking it and let me come in there. And I find it really invigorating.
You ready to get sued? You got the money to handle that if Big Beef comes after you there, John?
Listen, Link's family, please don't sue me. I can't. I don't have anything for you, for one thing. But I mean, what happened? I didn't actually get a cease and desist. What happened was that there was a conversation that went a bit haywire. It didn't go how either one of us expected. And then before I knew it, I was on a phone call with the PR representative saying, she was very lovely, like, this is how it works in the PR world, right? It's not like suddenly you get a cease and desist. It's, hey, we really would prefer to not be a part of this episode if this is the kind of road you're going to go down. And we'd hate to get legal involved with this. We wouldn't want to see that happen, but you probably will get a letter if that's what you decide to do. And that's kind of what we did. And we did kind of come to a understanding, to an agreement of what would be included in the edit and what didn't, what we wouldn't. And it was a reasonable one that I think was journalistically sound. But the nature of them asking to pull their participation if certain things were included actually better demonstrated my point than I could have. Of like, these companies, they're not these twee little meat makers who have just evolved into whatever. They are Goliaths of industry that swing their weight around really freely and are not afraid to use litigation as a tool to form their message.
Do you think the lady that doubts you're a journalist at all from the Star Tribune would think what you did was journalistically sound? For real? Like if you said, we came to an agreement with the subject we were interviewing, do you think she would go, that's utter BS? Or do you think she'd go, oh, I get where he's coming from?
Oh no! Like I'm maybe being more transparent than I would be if I was at like a traditional media publication by giving you that bit of information. But like one of the other parts of the conversation I had with the managing editor, with Kathleen, was about a story they did where they had to do like 2 paragraphs and a sidebar of how they gathered a story about a Trump administration official who they'd gotten text messages from. And so like this is just part of being someone in the content creation business, of which I would include the Star Tribune is as a content creator, is that they have to negotiate. Right? They have to negotiate, like, how are we going to tell the story? How are we going to keep from getting sued while still serving the public interest? And I think we're both doing the same thing. I'm just doing it with a lot fewer guardrails.
Really appreciate what you shared, John, and we're actually going to put a link to your video in the show notes. We want to hear from you. What do you think about journalism? What do you think about how folks who are navigating into the world of journalism are doing it well and perhaps also muddying the waters? Let us know by texting or leaving us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline, 612-217-0637. You might hear one of your comments in one of our mailbag segments, or we'll field one of your questions on an episode. There's more news to discuss. Before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. One thing we love to highlight on CityCast Twin Cities is cultural events, theater, music, and more. And we're so lucky to have a really fantastic contributor, Denzel Belin, who is deeply connected to the theater world himself, an actor, as well as being, of course, Mr. TC Leather 2026. But Denzel Belin took in a play that's wrapping up its run over at the Guthrie at the end of this week. I should mention that this is a Pulitzer Prize-winning play and got rave reviews from a lot of folks, including Denzel. So Denzel, can you please tell me a little bit more about this play, which is called Primary Trust?
Yes. So I had the wonderful opportunity last week to go see Primary Trust at the McGuire Proscenium stage at the Guthrie. And this intermissionless play blew me away. I knew easily 20 minutes in, I was going to stand up and applause. A little bit about the play. It's about 38-year-old Kenneth, who has everything he needs in his small town in upstate New York. He works at a bookstore. He has daily Mai Tais, and it's a pretty steady routine until it's not. And he finds himself unemployed, which goes through this wonderful journey of him getting this new job at Primary Trust and the wonderful people that he meets along the way. Now, this is written by Ebony Booth, and like Sean had mentioned before, this play won the Pulitzer Prize in 2024, and rightfully so. I was totally struck with the overall execution of this show, and especially the script. And Ebony Booth has spoken about this show, saying, we need each other, and I think that's important. To be able to let people in is crucial. And that crux permeates through this play entirely. It is a tight 4-person cast, and I believe all but 2 of them play multiple roles. And we have an out-of-town who's making their Guthrie debut, who plays the lead of Kenneth, who is one of the most striking actors I've seen on the stages at the Guthrie, and I know they're going to bring him back.
Denzel, did you just use an industry term? Does we have an out of town means somebody who came in from outside of our community to be an actor in the play?
Yes. So one of the wonderful things about the Guthrie and their status is not only do they employ local actors, which you can definitely see in shows like Cabaret and Christmas Carol, but they oftentimes will bring in actors from different parts of the country and sometimes international to just really deepen the breadth of what regional theater means to its audiences. So not only do you get to know the people here, you get to know people who are working all over the place right here in Minneapolis.
I'm wondering if you can talk to the skeptic who goes, 4 people and the highlights a guy gets a job at a bank. This sounds like a waste of 2 hours.
I would say that the things that you see that look so easy are actually the hardest things to execute. You kind of forget that this is a play that's been rehearsing for weeks. It does feel like you're just watching beautifully executed slice of life, that you're like, that guy must just be that way, that all these people are that way. But with beautiful touches of magic realism throughout the play, you are still kept that it is performance and it is telling you something and channeling something without just beating you over the head with its message, that it's showcasing through its action and through its characters that exact feeling that Ebony Booth was excited to seek about the connection and how important it is for humans to connect with each other and just the unparalleled impact it has on any person.
Yeah, you know what, Denzel, I have a question based on something you said, not about the play, but your reaction to the play, because you struck on something uniquely Minnesotan, which is your desire to give a standing ovation. When was the last time you went to a show where you did not give a standing ovation?
I'll be honest, most shows I do not give a standing ovation for.
Really? You're an outlier.
I'm not Minnesotan, famously. And for me, I will always applaud and be so grateful that other theater artists are doing the things. A standing ovation for me is not a conscious thought for me. It is, oh my God, I'm standing. I feel so overwhelmed by my joy and excitement that it lifts me out of my seat.
I mean, I think we have a real problem in Minnesota with ovationflation. I don't think I've been to a show in memory where there aren't at least a good number of people standing up after it. Even the most kind of not bad shows, just like, fine shows. And so I'm leading the charge now. Let's stop giving as many standing ovations, and maybe once every 5 shows maximum, you're allowed to stand up. That's my rule.
I hope people do it because they want to, not like they feel like they have to. As an actor myself, I don't need you to pretend that my work is brilliant. If my work is brilliant and resonates with you, I want you to express that. Knowing that I don't produce art that is for everyone, because I don't believe that there is universal standing ovation work.
That's all for today here on CityCast Twin Cities. I'm your host, Sean McPherson. John O'Sullivan from 1 Minute Tours, thank you so much for being with us.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And Denzel Belin, my fellow Krispy Kreme lover, CityCast contributor, NPR news coordinator, and Mr. Twin Cities Leather 2026 stand-up. Congratulations, Denzel, and thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you
standing
so
ovation
much
for Mr. Twin Cities Leather.
That's like 1 in 5. 1 in 5 right there.
Thank you. I am excited to get a Krispy Kreme with you, Sean.
You can get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to the CityCast Twin Cities newsletter. If you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with somebody who understands a good donut and appreciates Krispy Kreme? We'll see you back here tomorrow for more news from around the city.